let's talk heart rate training and the importance about adding the heart rate training to your pace and wattage within your training zones. That you're going to hear somebody say, hey, what heart rate zone are you in? Typically, they ask, what pace are you holding? What wattage are you maintaining? Okay, so that is a question based on exercise and workout intensity. But did you know that heart rate also is a gauge of intensity? Okay, so it varies based on your training zones, the caloric intake, the wattage, power, your pace. As runners and cyclists, we have gotten away from the importance of tracking heart rate. And there's many different philosophies based on coaches that you might work with, and that is absolutely okay. The point of this is to educate you on the importance of heart rate training, or even utilizing it as part of your training zone template, because based on weather, based on training intensity, there's multiple factors that are going to come into play. And so having your heart rate and being able to watch that heart rate along with your pace and wattage is going to be very important. Here's why. Now, let's say that you've been doing heart rate training for a long time, okay? And you've been base building and being very conservative with your training. So you've potentially built a solid aerobic base. That's excellent, but it's very important to dial in exactly what those heart rate zones are going to be as you move forward. Because if you've built a great base, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are set up for success to get faster, okay? Now, it is important to slow down so that you create the foundation. But when you go out to do interval training, when you go out to do speed work, if you don't know how hard you can push yourself and you're guessing, you might not even getting close to the point where you can stress that aerobic system and that anaerobic system for pace purposes or wattage purposes, okay? So what that means is if you've built that solid base, that's great. But if your legs aren't used to the greater turnover rate, your perception might say this feels like an 8 out of 10, but based on your heart rate, you're not even close to getting that threshold. Okay, so when you're doing your speed work and tempo work, you're not even getting the benefit that you could based on that foundation that you've built. Now, the flip side of this is if you've been doing a lot of base building, and that's great, but you've been overworking. So you think you've been in that zone 2, but your heart rate, and you're tracking your heart rate, and your heart rate says, yes, this is zone 2, but you haven't gotten it accurately assessed. What's going to end up happening is you're overworking this entire time. So instead of improving that aerobic base and that VO2, you're actually making your anaerobic energy system stronger and stronger, which the byproduct of that is lactic acid and increased muscle breakdown. So when you go to try to improve for racing or training purposes, maybe even general weight loss, you've been overworking for so long that you have to spend months of backtracking to try to rebuild that aerobic base. A big goal about heart rate training is to be able to utilize this metric to keep you within the goal. So are you focusing on your aerobic capacity? Are you focusing on wanting to stress your VO2 system but not go too intensely into an anaerobic state? So if we cross that bridge and go more anaerobic and utilize that energy system, we're no longer getting that aerobic base building zone 2 type of workout. We're now not utilizing oxygen efficiently, and we're requiring the substrate, carbohydrates, sugars, from our muscles to really get us through that workout. Where if we focused aerobically, we're going to utilize more oxygen as energy and fuel, and utilize the lactate that's going to be combusted. So part of the educational concept of this is being able to figure out at what point, based on your heart rate, is it going to take you from an aerobic training state to anaerobic? At what point are you going to be overworking and overtraining? And if you are truly ignoring your heart rate throughout this process, you could go out for a run on a hot and humid day and try to maintain a specific pace for an aerobic base building run. But if your heart rate jumps, now we've gone from that aerobic base building run into an anaerobic exercise and workout, which is going to be less sustainable and pull you from that goal. Okay, there's going to be a lot more muscle breakdown, a lot more carbohydrate utilization instead of fat. So your entire goal and purpose of that workout gets negated because you've ignored the one metric that can keep you within that target area. One thing we want to emphasize is our testing protocol allows you to figure out exactly what those training zones are based on heart rate, pace, and wattage, regardless of your location. So you don't have to find a lab and spend money traveling, spend time out of your day traveling to go somewhere. You can download the protocol and do it from your front door. Go to a local track, utilize your trainer at home for cyclists. As long as you have wattage available for cyclists, you can even utilize Zwift. And for runners, as long as you have GPS activation on your watch, you can do the protocol to truly dial in these metrics and your training zones accurately. Once you get these zones dialed in, they serve a purpose, okay? So your zone 1 and zone 2 can be that recovery and base building zone. And then we have a little bit of a gray area, which we'll show you, but that gray area is where you're still aerobic, but we're pushing close to threshold so that you can put a healthy amount of stress on your aerobic system and your heart. Now, once you get to zone 4, zone 5, or above threshold, now you've gone from that aerobic purpose to completely doing an anaerobic workout. Okay, so now we've gone away from the appropriate heart health type of stress from an oxygen standpoint to pushing too hard, and it's going to be primarily anaerobic. Now that gray area is very important, and a lot of people call that kind of that sweet spot training, okay? Because if you're too far on a conservative range, then yes, you're getting more of that fat burn, FatMax, lower heart rate, much lower heart rate, but it's not enough to stress that aerobic system efficiently. And so a lot of people that want to increase their VO2 or build a bigger base so that they can do more speed work, if you're being too conservative, you're not going to get that big benefit. Now that sweet spot training in that gray area that some coaches say, that's where we can really build the VO2 and really put some stress on that energy system in a healthy way. So not too much where we're taking oxygen away, but we're utilizing the oxygen and not going too fast, too hard into that anaerobic state. Once we hit threshold and cross over to that anaerobic state, now you're utilizing that stored carbohydrate. It's not going to be as efficient. We're going to increase that muscle breakdown, and muscle recovery is going to take a little longer. So as you can see, regardless of your training level and racing level, identifying exactly where those training zones are based on heart rate, pace, wattage, it just gives you more metrics. And from a health standpoint, it allows you to track that positively. So for example, if you're not tracking your heart rate and something feels off, you're going through some mood swings, trouble sleeping, you're not recovering well, chances are you're overtraining. If you were tracking your heart rate, then you'd be able to see that maybe your resting heart rate has started to increase, and then that's a trigger of you might be getting sick or overtrain. Okay, so it's very important. Regardless of your level, regardless of the goal, you could say, look, I just want to start exercising. That's great, because we want to track that heart rate to make sure you don't overtrain. You could say, hey, I'm trying to podium, I'm trying to win some races, or just improve my training and races throughout. Excellent. We want to dial in those training zones to make sure you're not under training, and that when you're doing your speed work and interval work, you have the appropriate work to rest ratios, not just based on pace or wattage, but based on heart rate, so that heat and humidity, they are going to play a factor, but they're not going to take away from the goal and purpose of your workout. Okay, so the link below will give you more information, and also a link to our remote testing protocol. You can purchase that. You can do that from anywhere. Cyclists, all you need is wattage. Runners, all you need is a GPS access watch. Okay, reach out if you have any questions.